It started with a knock at midnight, and a woman shivering outside his garage in the pouring rain. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't ask why she had nowhere to go. He just opened the door. But what began as one small act of kindness would unravel a story deeper than either of them could imagine, of broken pieces, second chances, and the quiet strength it takes to stay when the world expects you to leave. If you're someone who believes that even the smallest kindness can change a life, then this story was made for you. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this. Stories of hope, humanity, and the power of choosing compassion even when it's hard. Now, let's begin. She slept outside his garage. He helped her stand again. Weeks later, she bought the whole block. The wind howled through the narrow alleyways of the Easton Heights district like it was trying to blow the whole place off the map. Snow had started falling at dusk, but by 9 p.m., it was a full-blown nor'easter, biting, relentless, and merciless to anyone left outside. Travis Cole slammed the door of his creaking truck shut and stopped the snow off his boots. The headlights of the vehicle dimmed behind him, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete driveway that led to his modest garage and the tiny house tucked behind it. He carried a paper bag in one hand, half-priced rotisserie chicken, and a few bruised apples from the discount rack. It wasn't much, but it would do. Inside, his son, Evan, would be curled up on the couch with a book, or maybe that old tablet Travis had repaired from the salvage yard. But something made him stop. There was a shape barely visible curled up beside the garage door. At first he thought it might be a pile of trash or maybe some tarp blown in by the wind. But then it moved. Travis instinctively stepped back, then froze. The figure huddled tighter as if trying to melt into the wall. A woman, bare hands gripping a thin, dirty coat. Her head was bowed, hair wet, and stringy face buried in her knees. Her whole body trembled, not from fear, he knew that kind of shaking, but from cold. His first instinct was to call out to ask what she was doing on his property. His second was to walk inside and lock the door behind him. Instead, he stood there for a moment, wind slicing through his flannel shirt grocery bag growing heavy in his hand. He sighed. "Hey." The woman didn't move. "You okay?" A long pause, then her voice, hoarse and paper-thin, barely rose above the wind. "I'm fine. I'll leave. You'll freeze to death out here," he said flatly. "I've had worse." That stopped him cold. He could tell she wasn't trying to be dramatic. She meant it. Travis shifted his weight, looked back toward the house, then again at the woman curled up like a child outside his garage. He knew what the neighbors would say. Easton Heights wasn't the safest part of town, and everyone looked out for their own. You didn't invite trouble. You didn't open your door after dark, especially not to strangers. But Travis had seen enough of the world and lost enough in it to know better. He turned and walked inside without another word. 3 minutes later, he came back out with a thick flannel blanket, a metal thermos filled with warm water, and a flashlight. She looked up this time, startled by his return. "Here," he said, handing her the blanket. "I didn't ask for help." "Good," he said, "'cause I'm not offering charity, just common decency." She stared at him for a beat, eyes rimmed with red face, gaunt but somehow elegant beneath the grime. She looked too proud to beg and too exhausted to move. "Name's Travis," he added. "That's my garage. I live just behind it with my kid. You can sleep inside garage-only door locks from the outside, so no surprises. Heat's off, but it's better than freezing." The woman blinked, confusion flashing across her face. "Why?" He hesitated, then looked away. "Because someone once did the same for me." She didn't answer. He pointed toward the side door of the garage. "It's open. Just don't touch the tools. My kid gets jumpy if things go missing." She nodded, slightly, still gripping the blanket like it was made of gold. "Rachel," she said finally, barely a whisper. He gave a single nod and walked away. Inside the house, Evan was half asleep on the couch, a picture book open on his chest. Travis set the groceries down and gently shook him awake. "Hey, bud, you eat?" Yet Evan rubbed his eyes. "Not really." They ate together in comfortable silence. Travis didn't mention Rachel. He figured there'd be time later if she stuck around, which he doubted. People like her didn't stay. They passed through, burned out, disappeared. After Evan went to bed, Travis stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes by hand. His thoughts kept drifting to the garage. Who was she? Why was she out there in a storm like this? She didn't look like the usual transients that drifted through Easton Heights. Her voice had weight. Her eyes had history. Something about her presence was off. Not dangerous, just strange, like someone who didn't belong in the cold. That night's sleep didn't come easy. He got up at 2 a.m., couldn't help himself, grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the back door. When he opened the side entrance to the garage, Rachel was there curled on the old recliner he kept for oil changes. The blanket wrapped around her like armor, the thermos tucked into her chest like a lifeline. But she wasn't asleep. She was staring at the ceiling wide-eyed. Awake. Alert. Her face was damp, not from snow this time. She didn't say a word when she saw him. Neither did he. But for the briefest moment they looked at each other across the dim room, lit by a single bulb, and something passed between them. Not recognition. Not yet. Just something. He left the garage without a word, and locked the door behind him. By morning, the storm had slowed to a quiet drizzle. Snow clung to the power lines like tired ghosts, and the world outside Travis's window looked like it had been dipped in powdered sugar. Peaceful. Deceptive. Travis poured black coffee into an old ceramic mug chipped along the rim the way he liked it, strong and unsweetened. He glanced through the frosted glass of the kitchen window toward the garage. The memory of Rachel's eyes the night before still lingered with him. There was something about the way she had stared at the ceiling like she was waiting for it to collapse. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more, that she hadn't run or that he hoped she wouldn't. Dad Evan's voice was groggy. The boy shuffled into the kitchen wearing a t-shirt too big for him and socks that never matched. "What's for breakfast?" "Toast and eggs if I haven't run out," Travis said. He ruffled his son's hair, reaching instinctively for the skillet. As he cracked 2 eggs, he paused, then added a third. They didn't speak much during breakfast. Evan had always been a quiet kid, thoughtful in the way his late mother used to be. But halfway through his toast, Evan set it down and looked up. "There's someone in the garage," he said softly, not a question. Travis nodded. "Just for a night or two?" She needed someplace warm. Evan considered that, eyes serious in a way that didn't suit a 9-year-old. "Is she okay? I don't know yet," Travis admitted. After Evan left for school bundled in a coat, one size too small, Travis stood by the back door, coffee in hand, watching the clouds shift. Then he walked to the garage. He knocked once before entering. Rachel was seated on the recliner again, her blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She was awake, posture stiff as if she hadn't moved in hours. He placed a folded sweatshirt and a brown paper bag on the workbench beside her. "Clean shirt, some peanut butter crackers, and coffee if you want it. It's not fancy, but—" "Thank you." She interrupted, her voice low but steadier than the night before. Travis nodded and turned to leave, but something in her tone stopped him. She spoke again. "Why did you let me stay?" He turned slowly. "Because you needed somewhere warm, and you didn't ask for anything." Rachel's eyes flicked up to meet his. There was guarded suspicion there, like someone who'd learned the hard way that kindness always came with a price tag. "I can work," she said, "if you need help in the garage." Travis leaned against the doorframe. "You don't strike me as someone who knows her way around carburetors." That earned a slight lift in her eyebrow. "Try me." He paused, intrigued. "What's a camshaft?" She didn't hesitate. "Part of the valve train. It rotates to open and close intake and exhaust valves in sync with piston movement." Travis blinked. "Okay. Not bad." She gave a faint shrug. "My father was a mechanic. I used to hand him tools when I was a kid." Travis studied her. The way she spoke, calm, precise, but never offering too much. She chose her words like someone who'd once lived in a world of contracts and clauses. You ever work in a shop? Rachel hesitated. No. A lie, or not the full truth. He let it go. You're not from around here, he said. No, she replied. Silence stretched between them. He nodded toward the bench. You're welcome to stay a few days. Just don't touch the lift, it's cranky. I'll show you which tools not to breathe near. That almost made her smile. As Travis stepped out into the gray morning, he felt the oddest mix of things. Curiosity, concern, and something else he couldn't name yet. Rachel wasn't just passing through. He didn't know how he knew that. But he did. That evening, while Travis wiped grease from his hands and tried to unclog the radiator on a Ford pickup, he glanced through the garage window and saw Rachel sitting at the workbench. She wasn't idle. She was organizing sockets, arranging wrenches by size. She moved with quiet efficiency, as if putting things in order helped her hold on to something invisible. You know, he said aloud, not looking up, most people don't alphabetize tools. I'm not most people, she said simply. He couldn't argue with that. Evan arrived from school later than usual. Travis found him in the backyard, sitting cross-legged in the snow with the old tablet on his knees. Rachel was beside him, not saying much, just watching as he showed her a game he'd built from code blocks. You did that yourself? She asked softly. Evan nodded. Mom taught me some before she got sick. Dad doesn't really get it. I think it's brilliant, she said, and Evan beamed. Travis stood at a distance watching them. Something in his chest twisted. Not jealousy, not exactly, but a kind of ache. Rachel, with all her silence and shadows, had still found a way to speak Evan's language. A small thing. But to a father trying his best, it meant everything. That night, as the snow returned in flurries and the house settled into its usual creaks and sighs, Travis stood at the kitchen sink again. The light from the garage window was still on. He could see Rachel's silhouette bent over the workbench, her hands moving steady and precise. He wondered what her real story was. Not the fragments she'd shared, but the truth beneath the practiced calm. The name she didn't say. The life she'd walked away from. And why, even now, she still hadn't left. The days that followed unfolded like hesitant pages of a forgotten book, quiet, fragile, but somehow warm around the edges. Rachel remained in the garage, and though she never stayed long in one place, never let her shoulders fully relax or her guard completely fall, she stayed. And Travis didn't ask why. He didn't press when she said little. He didn't pry when he caught her staring too long at old photos in his shop, or when he noticed her organizing the same drawer of bolts 3 times in one afternoon. He simply gave her space. A roof. Warm coffee in the mornings, and the unspoken truth that she didn't need to explain herself to be safe here. One morning, just as the sky broke from gray to golden, Travis found her standing behind Evan, watching over his shoulder as he fiddled with his tablet. He codes, she said, a small note of admiration in her voice. He tries, Travis replied, stepping onto the porch with a half smile. I don't get half of it, but it makes him light up. He's good, she said. More than good. He has an intuitive mind. Travis blinked at that, at the certainty in her voice. She spoke like someone who had once evaluated people's sized-up talent. Not just as a compliment, but with the language of someone who had seen hundreds of resumes, maybe thousands. He leaned on the railing. You talk like a teacher, or a recruiter. Rachel said nothing for a moment. Then, you learn a lot when you listen. It was the closest thing to a confession he'd heard from her. He didn't push further, but the seed was planted. That night, Evan knocked gently on his father's bedroom door. Dad Travis looked up from the invoice he was recalculating by hand. Yeah, Bud. Evan stepped in slowly, biting his lip. Is Miss Rachel going to stay forever? Travis felt his heart trip a little. No, he said, keeping his voice level. She's just here until she gets back on her feet. Do people get back on their feet fast sometimes? And if they don't, Travis smiled faintly. Then we help them stand longer. Evan seemed to consider that. She reads the same books Mom used to. She drinks tea with no sugar, and she folds laundry, like, really perfectly. Travis chuckled softly. Maybe she's just someone who likes order. Evan frowned. But people who like order usually have somewhere to go. That silenced Travis. He didn't have a neat answer for that one. A week later, Travis came home to find Rachel scrubbing the kitchen floor on her knees. "You don't have to do that," he said, eyebrows raised. She didn't look up. It needed doing. He reached for a towel to help dry the floor, crouching beside her. "Garage too dusty for you now. Your son eats cereal like a raccoon," she replied without smiling, though he thought he saw the hint of one twitch at the corner of her mouth. "I tell him to be neater. He's 9. That's an optimistic strategy." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Rachel moved with care and efficiency. Everything she touched, she made neater, calmer. Travis had begun to realize that cleaning wasn't just a task for her. It was a way to restore control, to bring calm to a world that had once spun out of hers. Later, while she prepared grilled cheese sandwiches with the precision of a line cook, Travis finally asked the question that had been simmering for days. "Do you have anyone out there?" Rachel paused her hand mid-slice. She set the knife down gently and looked at him. "Not anymore." He nodded once. Didn't ask how or why or what that meant. Just took 2 plates and set the table. That night, Evan fell asleep on the couch again, curled up in a blanket too big for him. Travis had started to lift him when Rachel motioned him to stop. "I'll take care of it," she said gently. He watched as she bent over Evan, lifting him with practiced care. She carried him to his room with a quiet grace, tucking the blanket under his chin, brushing his hair back like she'd done it 1,000 times before. It stopped Travis cold in the hallway. That simple act, that unspoken tenderness. It wasn't pity, it wasn't a favor, it was love. Not romantic, not motherly, even just pure instinctual care, and it hit him like a freight train. She was capable of it. Despite whatever scars she carried, despite the past she kept buried deep, Rachel hadn't lost the part of herself that knew how to show up for someone else. Later, Travis found her outside on the back steps sipping tea from a chipped mug. "You don't talk much about your past," he said, sitting beside her. Rachel didn't answer right away. The night was crisp, the stars sharp and clear. "I used to live in buildings with glass walls and espresso machines in the conference rooms," she said softly. "People called me ma'am, even when they didn't mean it. I signed checks with more zeros than I could count. And then, one day, none of it meant anything." Travis looked at her but didn't speak. Turns out, she added, "A title is just a costume, and when people want you gone, they don't care how long you wore it." Travis took a slow breath. "Well, for what it's worth, no one calls you ma'am here." She gave a dry laugh. "I noticed. And I can't promise espresso, but I've got a decent drip machine that groans a little." She looked at him, then really looked, and for the first time her eyes weren't guarded. They were tired and grateful. "Thanks for not asking me to explain," she said. "You don't owe me an explanation," he replied. "You just owe it to yourself not to vanish." Rachel looked down at the mug in her hands as if it held something heavier than tea. And for the first time, Travis saw her not as a woman lost or hiding or broken, but as someone quietly, steadily beginning to return. The wind had shifted. Not outside the early spring air was mild, almost forgiving, but inside Rachel's eyes something stirred. Travis noticed it the morning she dropped a mug and didn't apologize. Her hands had been steady all week, but today they shook. She barely spoke during breakfast, and when Evan offered her a drawing, his rendition of the 3 of them as superheroes, Rachel only smiled faintly and said she needed air. Travis watched her from the kitchen window as she paced the gravel lot behind the garage, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her shoulders looked smaller than usual, pulled inward as if bracing for something invisible. He didn't follow. Not yet. By mid-morning, Rachel had disappeared. She left behind the sweatshirt he'd lent her folded on the edge of the recliner in the garage. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Travis checked every corner of the property, the alley, the vacant lot across the street, even the small park 2 blocks away where the old veterans played chess when the weather allowed. Nothing. By late afternoon, she was still gone. Evan sat cross-legged on the porch, arms looped around his knees. "Did she leave?" he asked. "I don't know yet," Travis answered honestly. "She didn't say goodbye." "No," Travis said quietly. "She didn't." That night the storm returned. Not snow-rain, cold, insistent sheets of it that rattled against the roof and soaked the concrete with ghostly reflections. Travis couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing in particular, trying not to imagine Rachel alone, somewhere soaking wet cold, frightened. Or worse. Then it happened. A voice, sharp, clipped, and very much alive, rang from the front porch. "Travis." He rushed to the door and yanked it open. Rachel stood there soaked to the skin, shaking from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face in dark cords, and her jeans were plastered to her legs like a second skin. She looked like she'd run for miles, but her eyes burned. "Let me in," she said, breathless. He stepped aside without a word. She staggered past him, dripping on the hardwood, and collapsed into the nearest chair chest, heaving. Travis didn't speak. He moved to the linen closet, pulled out 2 towels, and handed one to her. Rachel wiped her face, her arms, then clutched the towel around her like armor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't apologize," Travis said gently. "Just tell me what happened." She was silent for a long time. Then she looked up, eyes red, not just from the wind. "I saw him." "Who?" "The man who ruined me." Travis's heart tightened. He lowered himself slowly into the chair across from her. "You're sure?" Rachel nodded. "I went into town. I needed to walk, clear my head. I stopped by a coffee shop near the old courthouse, and there he was, Andrew Marcus, my former CFO, the one who orchestrated the buyout behind my back." She laughed bitterly, a dry sound that held no joy. He was with a new team, laughing, in a tailored suit, drinking a caramel latte, like nothing ever happened. Travis let the silence hold between them. "I froze," she continued. "He didn't recognize me, or pretended not to, but I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I walked out into the street without thinking and just kept walking. How far? 3 miles, maybe more, in the rain. I ended up near the river." Her voice broke. "I sat there for over an hour trying to decide if I should vanish again." Travis's jaw clenched. "But I didn't," Rachel whispered. "Because Evan made me that drawing. Because you gave me a sweatshirt. Because someone looked at me and didn't ask for anything." She looked at him then, not with fear, but with something else. Something raw. A plea not to be looked at as broken. Or weak. Just human. Travis leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "You came back. That's what matters." She wiped her face with the towel again, a soft exhale leaving her lips. "I thought I was past all this," she admitted, "that I'd buried it deep enough. But seeing him, it was like every lie, every headline, every boardroom betrayal came back like a freight train." "You were ambushed," Travis said gently. "That doesn't mean you haven't healed. It just means healing isn't linear." Rachel blinked, absorbing his words like water in dry soil. "Do you know what I miss most?" she said after a pause. "It's not the power or the money. It's the rhythm, the ability to make decisions and feel useful, like I had purpose." "You still have it," he said softly. "We're right here," he nodded toward the garage. "You've been running this place better than I ever did." A ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. "Don't overstate it," she muttered. "I'm serious," Travis said. "Evan listens to you. You rebuilt the tool wall from memory. You fix problems I don't even see until after the fact. Purpose doesn't have to wear heels and hold stock options." Her eyes welled up again, but she didn't look away this time. I don't know how to be anyone else, she said. Maybe you don't need to be someone else, he replied. Maybe you just need to be Rachel, the one who came back. She lowered her gaze. The room was quiet except for the ticking clock and the steady rhythm of rain. Finally, she whispered, I'm tired of running. Travis nodded slowly. Then stop. That night he brought out extra blankets for the recliner in the garage, but Rachel didn't take them. She curled up on the worn couch in the living room instead, across from where Travis eventually dozed in the recliner, one arm slung over his eyes. They didn't speak again before sleep took them. But the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was the sound of a storm that had passed, and the quiet afterward where something stronger begins. The following morning, the world outside looked newly washed. Puddles glistened like melted mirrors and the sky stretched wide, impossibly blue. It felt like a different season had arrived overnight. But inside Travis's small house, the storm still lingered in quiet corners. Rachel stood at the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window, her hands submerged in soapy water, though the dishes were already clean. The sleeves of her borrowed flannel shirt were rolled to the elbows. Her hair was pulled back slightly damp from the shower, and her face was unreadable. Travis stepped in softly, a cup of coffee in each hand. I already did those, he said, offering one of the mugs. Rachel blinked as if waking from a distant thought. She took the coffee and dried her hands on a dish towel that had seen better years. I needed something to do, she said quietly. You slept here last night, he noted. She gave a small nod. Didn't feel like going back out there. I'm glad you didn't. Silence settled between them again, comfortably this time. The kind of silence where nothing had to be fixed, only witnessed. Rachel took a sip of the coffee, then set it down and walked to the hallway closet. Travis raised an eyebrow, looking for something. She didn't answer. She pulled out her worn satchel, the only thing she'd brought when she first arrived besides the clothes on her back. Until now, she'd kept it zipped tight, always within arm's reach, but never opened. She brought it to the table and sat across from Travis, her hands trembling slightly as she unzipped it. What I'm about to show you, she said softly, I haven't looked at since I disappeared. Travis straightened in his chair, his fingers tightening around the coffee mug. Rachel reached inside and withdrew a single manila folder, thick and worn its edges slightly curled. She placed it between them like an offering. This, she said, is everything they tried to bury. She opened the file. Travis scanned the documents, financial statements, shareholder memos, private emails printed out in black and white, most of them highlighted or annotated in pen. They told the world I'd approved a merger that was never meant to happen, Rachel said, voice steady now. In reality, I was outvoted and forced out 2 days before they made the deal official. But by then, they had already planted enough evidence to make it look like I orchestrated the whole thing. Travis shook his head. And no one believed you. Rachel's mouth twitched, not a smile. They didn't have to. I disappeared. And silence looks a lot like guilt when you're not there to defend yourself. Travis gently pushed one of the documents closer. These prove you weren't behind it. They prove enough to raise questions. But by the time anyone cared, the damage was done. My accounts were frozen, my reputation shredded. The headlines said, reckless leadership and fraud by neglect. But the truth was more boring. They were greedy, and I was in the way. She pulled a photograph from the folder. A boardroom. 10 people seated around a long mahogany table. She pointed to herself at the center, hair slicked back, navy suit eyes sharp. Then she pointed to a man seated 2 chairs to her right. Andrew Marcus, the one I saw yesterday. The name landed like a stone in Travis's gut. He's now heading a private equity firm, Rachel said. Still climbing, still smiling for Forbes. Travis looked at her closely. So why keep this? I thought about burning it 100 times, she admitted. But something stopped me. Maybe because I knew that one day I'd have to remember that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't weak, that I knew the truth. She paused, tracing a crease in the folder. And maybe Because some part of me still wants justice. Travis leaned back, nodding slowly. But justice, she continued, isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's just being seen, being believed. He exhaled. You should do something with this. Go public. Reopen your name. Rachel looked out the window. And be dragged through the court of public opinion again. Called bitter, vindictive people forget headlines fast, Travis, but they never forget scandal. What if you didn't do it alone? He asked. She turned to him, startled. He added, what if you had a platform, a reason that wasn't about you, something bigger? She watched him, skeptical but curious. You've been helping people since the moment you walked into my life, Travis said. Evan, this garage, even the way you cleaned the house. You want to make things better, not louder. Rachel tilted her head. And what if you started there? Build something. A program, a center, a place where people like you, people chewed up by the system, can find a second chance. She blinked, caught off guard, and then she asked. Then he said, when they ask who you are, you tell them. Fully, honestly, and with something stronger than a rebuttal, you show them what you've built. She looked down at the file, her fingers lightly tapping the edge. The idea seemed to hang in the air like a new possibility. A pivot, not toward the past, but toward something healing, purposeful. I haven't planned anything in over 2 years, she whispered. Travis gave a small smile. You organized my tool wall by size, utility, and frequency of use. If that's not planning, I don't know what is. A tiny laugh escaped her, her first real laugh since she'd arrived. And in that sound there was a crack in the armor, a note of light. She closed the file and held it close to her chest. Maybe she said it's time I stopped hiding behind what happened. Travis reached for her hand without thinking, and this time she didn't pull away. Sunday morning rolled in soft and golden, the kind of rare light that made even cracked sidewalks look beautiful. Travis stood on the porch, sipping his coffee, watching Evan try to teach a neighborhood cat to sit for treats. The cat, predictably unimpressed, ignored him completely. Inside, Rachel was at the stove, flipping pancakes, something she hadn't done before. Travis could smell the cinnamon from the porch, and he lingered, afraid if he stepped inside too quickly the spell might break. He'd been watching her differently lately, not just with concern or curiosity, but with something warmer, deeper, dangerous if he let it grow too fast. He stepped into the kitchen just as she plated the last pancake. You're making yourself comfortable, he said. Rachel shrugged lightly. Someone left their flour and eggs just lying around. He smiled. That someone's kitchen hasn't smelled this good in years. They sat down together, just the two of them. Evan had wandered to the neighbors to show off his coding trick, leaving an odd silence in his absence. Rachel poured syrup carefully, then looked up. I've been thinking. Travis raised an eyebrow. Oh. She gave a small smile. About the idea you mentioned. The center. A place for second chances. He leaned in. Yeah, I like it, she said. Not because it fixes anything from my past, but because maybe it turns all that loss into something useful. And maybe I need that more than I thought. Travis nodded slowly, careful not to interrupt her rhythm. Rachel continued. I don't want revenge, I don't want a press conference, but I do want to reclaim the part of me that believed in building something. He studied her face. There was resolve there. Not the kind that came from anger, but the quieter, sturdier kind that rises from surviving something that didn't kill you. I think you'd be damn good at it, he said. Rachel took a breath. But there's something else I've been thinking about too. She looked at him now, direct, unflinching. I need to stop treating this place like a pit stop. Travis's chest tightened. What are you saying? I want to stay, she said simply. Not just for a few nights. I want to try being part of something again. This house, Evan, you, the garage, maybe the center if it becomes real. For a moment, Travis couldn't speak. Part of him had feared this moment for weeks, not because he didn't want her to stay, but because he wanted it too much. And things he wanted that deeply rarely worked out. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm scared," she said honestly. "But I've spent 2 years disappearing. I don't want to vanish anymore." There was no grand gesture, no music swelling in the background, just two people sitting at a scratched-up kitchen table with pancakes growing cold between them, finally choosing not to run. Over the next few days, something in the rhythm of the house changed. Rachel stayed. She moved from the garage to the spare room, helped Travis set up a corner in the garage for community tools, and even started sketching out ideas for the center notes scribbled in the margins of old receipts and yellowing manuals. One afternoon, Travis came home to find Evan and Rachel on the floor of the living room surrounded by Legos and markers. They weren't building anything in particular, just laughing, arguing about whether you could make a spaceship with only 4 bricks. Evan saw Travis first. "Dad, she's a maniac. She built a spaceship shaped like a banana. It's aerodynamic," Rachel said without missing a beat. Travis laughed. "I don't even want to know." But as he leaned against the doorframe watching them, he felt something settle inside him like gravity returning to a place that had been drifting. His house hadn't just gotten louder. It had become alive again. That evening, Rachel stood at the kitchen sink drying dishes, her sleeves pushed up, and a dish towel slung over her shoulder like she belonged there. "I talked to someone today," she said, almost too casually. Travis, drying his hands, looked up. "Yeah, a woman named Jessica Tran. Used to be in PR at Prism. She reached out, heard I was alive. Wanted to talk." Travis set the towel down slowly. "You okay?" Rachel nodded. "It was better than I expected." She said a few people in the industry never believed the official story, that there's a network of women executives trying to expose dirty boardroom politics. She asked if I'd speak at a forum next month. Travis studied her. "Are you going to?" Rachel hesitated, then said, "Not yet. I told her I'm working on something here. Something real. I'll speak when I have something worth saying." He smiled. "I'd say you already do." Rachel looked at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "What if I mess it up?" she asked. "This whole staying thing? What if I don't know how to be part of this anymore?" Travis stepped closer, his voice low and certain. "You got up. You came back. You stayed. That's more than half the world ever tries." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he admitted, "but it's worth it." There was something fragile and brave in the silence that followed. A moment neither of them rushed to fill. Then Evan called from the other room demanding help with math homework and declaring the cat had finally sat for a treat. Rachel turned with a soft laugh. Travis didn't stop her. He just watched her walk away and for the first time in years let himself imagine a future that might not fall apart. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that wrapped itself around the walls like fog, dense, unspoken wrong. Travis stood in the doorway of the spare room. The sheets were smoothed out with mechanical precision. The pillow fluffed the closet door slightly ajar. On the nightstand, a coffee mug sat rinsed and turned upside down on a folded dish towel. But Rachel was gone. No note, no message, no packed bag left behind. Just gone. His first instinct was denial. Maybe she'd taken a walk. Maybe she'd run to the store. But the signs were too familiar, the little clues of someone trying to slip away without a sound. He'd seen it before in other people in other lives. That quiet vanishing that wounded deeper than any shout. He checked the garage. Nothing had been touched. The tool drawers were still arranged by Rachel's quiet logic. The rag she always folded into fourths sat clean on the bench. It was like she'd preserved it all for someone else. By noon, Travis had called her name 3 times around the block, walked to the park, to the corner store, even the library she once lingered outside but never entered. Nothing. When he returned, Evan was waiting on the front steps, backpack slung low, eyes unusually serious. "Where's Rachel?" Travis crouched in front of him. I'm Not sure, buddy. Evan frowned. Did she leave for good? I don't know. You think she got scared again? Travis didn't answer, but Evan did something that cracked Travis's heart wide open. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded paper. A new drawing. 3 people and a cat standing in front of the garage. This time, Rachel was at the center. She said once that drawings tell stories, Evan murmured. So I drew a new one. So she'll know we're still here. Travis blinked hard and took the drawing like it was made of glass. That night, Travis sat alone in the garage. He'd left the side door open, hoping for a sound, a shadow, anything. Instead, only silence and the steady tick of a leaky sink in the background. He leaned against the workbench, Rachel's folder still tucked safely on the shelf above the one she never reclaimed. He thought about the day she told him she wanted to stay, how she'd said it like a vow. And now, this disappearance felt like a betrayal, not of him, but of herself. The next morning, as if the universe had decided to twist the knife, a letter arrived. Not from Rachel. From the city council. Final notice of redevelopment approval. Easton Heights was officially under contract. The land would be cleared in 60 days for a new mixed-use commercial development. Homes, garages, families, everything would be uprooted. Travis stood in the driveway, fingers tightening around the paper as the neighborhood's fragile peace shattered. He heard Mrs. Rodriguez down the block yelling into a phone. Mr. Banks muttering curses at his mailbox. Kids chasing a soccer ball, unaware that their patch of grass wouldn't be there in 2 months. Rachel was gone. The neighborhood was next. He felt the weight of it all pressing into his ribs, the kind of pressure that came when a man had no more room to carry things but kept carrying anyway. That night, Evan crawled into Travis's lap without a word. They sat on the porch together, wrapped in one of Rachel's old flannel throws. The stars flickered above, stubborn and distant. She's not like the other people who left, Evan whispered. No, Travis said. She's not. Do you think she meant to go? Travis exhaled. I think she meant to stay. But sometimes the past shouts louder than the present. Evan rested his head against his father's chest. I hope she finds her voice louder. Travis didn't speak because the boy had said exactly what he couldn't. Days passed. The space Rachel had filled remained untouched. Travis didn't move her things. He couldn't. The house had become a museum of recent hope. A flannel shirt on the back of a chair, a shopping list half scribbled on a napkin, a screwdriver left in the wrong drawer. Then, one evening, while Travis was under the hood of an old Buick, a shadow appeared at the edge of the driveway. He looked up, half expecting another city official, but it was Mrs. Talbot, the neighborhood historian and community organizer, her graying braid coiled tight under a Yankees cap. You get the notice? She asked. Travis wiped grease from his hands and nodded. Yeah, they're serious this time. Bringing in surveyors next week. He nodded again. Mrs. Talbot looked at him, frowning. You look like a man who lost more than just a lease. He didn't respond. She reached into her oversized tote and pulled out a flyer. There's a petition. A few of us are meeting to try and fight back. Not much hope, but it's something. Travis took the paper and glanced at the names. One name, handwritten at the bottom, caught his breath. Rachel Whitmore. His eyes shot up. When did you see her? Mrs. Talbot blinked. Just yesterday. She showed up at the council building. Spoke to someone from zoning. Said she was looking into alternative funding proposals. Thought she looked familiar. Told me she used to live in the area. Travis felt like someone had dropped the garage floor out from under him. She hadn't vanished. She had gone to fight. That night he sat at the kitchen table with the drawing Evan had made clutched in his hand. 3 people and a garage. A reminder, not of what they had lost, but of what still might be found. The rain arrived before dawn, soft and persistent, tapping against the windows like a memory. Travis woke to the sound and sat upright, heart racing. Not from fear, but anticipation. He hadn't been able to shake Mrs. Talbot's words. She's fighting. He hadn't told Evan yet. Somehow, it felt like speaking Rachel's name out loud might make the fragile thread of hope snap. But he knew the truth. Rachel hadn't disappeared. She had gone forward, quietly, deliberately, and with the same precision he'd come to admire in everything she touched. He made coffee, sat by the window, and waited. At 8:42 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside the garage, the kind of car that didn't belong in Easton Heights, shiny, silent, expensive. Travis stepped outside before the engine cut off. The passenger door opened. Rachel stepped out. She wore a navy blue coat, her hair pulled back into a low bun, eyes alert but tired. In one hand she held a leather folder. In the other, an umbrella she didn't seem to notice was still closed. Travis just stood there frozen. "I didn't run," she said softly, walking toward him. "I redirected." Rain darkened her shoulders, but she didn't flinch. Travis met her halfway. "I thought you left," he said, voice thick. "I almost did," she replied. "But then I realized something. If I kept walking away every time my past showed up, I'd never build anything new." She looked toward the garage, the small home behind it, the gravel driveway where Evan had once drawn chalk stars that were still faintly visible. "I came back," she said again, firmer now, "because this is where I want to stand when the ground finally stops shaking." Travis swallowed hard. "You've been to the council?" She nodded. "I had to move fast. I met with an attorney. Quiet, but good. I proposed a counteroffer to the redevelopment plan through a newly registered nonprofit." Travis blinked. "You set up a nonprofit?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Phoenix Initiative. Filed under Educational Redevelopment and Community Revitalization." He stared at her like she'd just rebuilt the Empire State Building with a paperclip. "I used the remaining funds from my settlement with Prism," she said. "The part I never touched. It wasn't enough to buy the whole block, but it was enough to match the city's grant. If she pulled a document from her folder, we could prove this garage could be the first pilot site for vocational training." Travis stared at her, stunned. "You made a proposal?" With this garage, Rachel looked around. "It's not about what it looks like. It's about what it represents. A place where people start over, where kindness isn't a transaction, where second chances aren't just a slogan." He ran a hand through his hair. "Rachel, this is massive and risky." "I know," she said, "but I'm not afraid of risk. I'm afraid of living quietly while the wrong people keep winning." Then her voice softened. "And I'm afraid of walking away from something real." She looked at him, then really looked. "You, Evan, this place, you grounded me before I even remembered who I was. Let me give something back that's more than a thank you." The rain picked up. Travis didn't move. "I wanted to tell you sooner," she said, "but I didn't want to come back with words. I wanted to come back with action." His throat tightened. "You think the council will go for it? They weren't convinced until I showed them this." She reached into her folder and pulled out Evan's drawing, the one Travis had tucked into the folder weeks ago without realizing it was missing. "It fell out when I picked up the documents you left on the table," she said. "I brought it with me just to remind myself why I was doing it. But the council member who saw it—" He stopped. He stared. He said, "That looks like my old neighborhood." She smiled gently. He signed on the spot. Travis let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "So what happens now?" he asked. Rachel handed him the document. "The petition goes public next week. The zoning freeze buys us 60 more days. We need signatures, press, a launch event, community involvement. You want me to run the garage as part of a training center?" She looked at him like the question itself was absurd. "I want you to lead it. You're already doing the work. Let's make it official." He laughed under his breath, overcome. "Rachel, this changes everything." She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "That's the idea?" Inside, the front door creaked open. Evan peeked out, blinking sleepily, hair sticking out in every direction. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Rachel." She knelt in the rain, arms open. Evan ran toward her like a shot. Travis watched as she wrapped him tightly in her arms. He saw her press her face into his hair, saw her shoulders shake, not from cold this time, but something older, deeper. He felt something shift inside himself, too. She hadn't just returned. She had chosen them, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And sometimes that's where healing begins, not in grand victories, but in the quiet miracle of someone coming back when they could have stayed gone. The old garage, had never been quieter, not in the way of sound, but in spirit. There was a hush in the air, like the building itself was holding its breath. Travis stood at the workbench, grease-stained plans spread out before him. Rachel's laptop opened to a slide deck marked Phoenix Initiative, Pilot Site, Easton Heights. He wasn't used to words like pilot site or vocational certification pathways. He was used to words like alternator driveshaft bill due Friday. But he kept reading, because something real was taking shape. Rachel walked in with 2 coffees, hers, black his, with the smallest splash of cream, exactly the way he'd once mentioned in passing weeks ago. She remembered everything. Not as a trick not to impress, but like it mattered to her. They approved the draft, she said, setting the cups down. We're officially on the docket for the neighborhood town hall vote next week. Travis looked up. That fast, Rachel nodded. We're gaining momentum. Press is picking it up. Local business leaders are getting behind the concept. And? She hesitated, then smiled. We got a call this morning. The mayor's office wants to send someone to the launch event. Travis whistled low. Well, guess I should shave. She laughed, a sound that had grown more natural on her lately. It was warmer, now freer. And every time he heard it, something in him relaxed. They leaned over the plans together, measurements, layout sketches, tool inventories. The garage would stay open for business during the day, but at night and weekends it would serve as a training site. Basic mechanics, vocational prep, financial literacy, mentorship programs. Rachel pointed to a corner marked Community Zone. I want this to be more than just job training, she said. I want people to feel like they belong somewhere again. I remember what it was like to sit at the top of a glass tower and feel completely alone. Travis nodded. And I remember sitting in this garage wondering if I'd ever get out of the red again. Their eyes met. There were no grand speeches between them, no declarations. Just shared understanding. Just home. Later that afternoon, Rachel sat at the kitchen table going through volunteer applications. Evan burst in from the school bus, cheeks flushed, backpack bouncing. I got it, he shouted, waving a permission slip in the air. The principal said, I can do my presentation on the Phoenix Initiative at school. Next week, Rachel turned in her chair, her expression softening. You're doing a presentation, Evan nodded, practically glowing. I get to show the other kids how second chances aren't just for adults. I drew a poster with us in front of the garage, and the cat. I gave him a name, Sir Pounce. Rachel laughed out loud, clutching her chest like the sound surprised even her. You're incredible you know that, she said, pulling him into a hug. Evan grinned, then looked between the 2 adults. Are we like a team now? For real, Travis looked at Rachel, then back at Evan. Yeah, kid. I think we are. Evan threw his arms in the air. Best team ever. And just like that, it became true. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the row houses and bathed the neighborhood in copper light, Travis and Rachel stood in the center of the garage looking at the freshly painted logo above the bench, a simple flame curved into the shape of a heart next to bold white letters, the Phoenix Garage. You made this possible, Travis said. Rachel shook her head. No, you did. I just gave the fight a name. He looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the woman who arrived shivering outside his garage weeks ago. That woman had vanished. This Rachel stood taller, still scarred, still cautious but steady, a woman who had decided to build forward instead of bury backward. There was a pause. Then she said quietly, There's one more thing. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a set of legal documents stamped and notarized. I added you as co-founder and executive director of the initiative, she said. The grant stipulates shared community leadership. I want you to have equal say, equal power." He stared at the papers, stunned. "Rachel, I'm not qualified." "You're more than qualified," she interrupted. "You're the reason it exists. You know what people need here better than anyone." His fingers grazed the document eyes tracing his name. Travis Cole, Executive Director. It wasn't about power. It was about being seen, being believed in. Rachel stepped closer. "You gave me a place to stay. Then you gave me space to breathe. You never asked me to be anything but honest. That saved me, Travis." He turned toward her, voice thick. "You walked back into your own fire just to pull others out." They stood there in the golden hush of the garage, surrounded by tools and hope and the hum of a new future. Then, quietly, Rachel reached for his hand. And for the first time, he didn't hesitate. Their fingers laced together not out of need or rescue, but out of choice. The blueprint wasn't just for a center. It was for something much harder to build: trust, belonging, a life worth living again. And this time, they'd draw every line together. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, mingling with motor oil and spring air through the open garage doors. It was opening day. Not for the garage, Travis had opened it 100 times before, but for what it had become. The Phoenix garage was no longer just a place where engines were repaired. It was now a symbol of resilience, restoration, and something even more powerful: belonging. The folding chairs were lined up on the cracked asphalt outside. A temporary podium stood near the workbench, surrounded by flower pots from Mrs. Rodriguez and hand-painted signs by local kids. Evans was front and center: second chances. Start here, in bold red crayon, a stick figure version of their team smiling beneath a giant sun. Travis adjusted his collared shirt for the 5th time. He still couldn't believe Rachel had convinced him to speak, or that the mayor's office had accepted the invitation, or that the entire neighborhood had shown up, including the same zoning official who just weeks earlier had signed the notice to level their block. "You nervous?" Rachel asked beside him, slipping her hand into his. He gave a half laugh. "I'm a mechanic. The only speeches I give are to alternators." She smiled. "Just speak like you fix things clearly and with care." Travis squeezed her hand. Then the council rep stepped forward and waved them to the front. Travis cleared his throat, stepped to the mic, and stared out at the sea of familiar faces: neighbors, volunteers, teens in second-hand jackets, elders in lawn chairs. Evans stood near the front, clutching a notebook and looking up like his dad was about to read a bedtime story. He took a breath. This garage, he began, used to be just 4 walls and a dozen busted engines. But over the years it became something else. A place where folks stopped by not just for help with a car, but sometimes with their lives. Because what needed fixing wasn't always under the hood. The crowd leaned in silent. He looked at Rachel, then back at the crowd. A few months ago, someone showed up here in the middle of a storm. She didn't ask for help. She didn't say much. But her being here changed everything. She reminded me, and maybe all of us, that people don't need to be perfect to be worth showing up for. Rachel looked down, eyes wet. "So we built this." Travis continued, gesturing around them. "Together. Not just a place to learn trade skills or get back on your feet, but a place to believe again in yourself, in second chances, in community." He paused, "And we're just getting started." The applause was immediate, genuine, and long. As Travis stepped down, Rachel took his place. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need to. "I used to think success meant glass towers and stock options," she said. "Then I lost all of that, and for a while I lost myself too. But here, I found something I never had even in the boardroom." She looked at Evan, then at Travis. "I found people who didn't ask who I used to be. They only asked if I was okay. And that saved me." The crowd was silent again, the kind of silence that listens with its whole heart. "So this isn't just about jobs," she said. "It's about restoring dignity. It's about saying to every person who's ever felt forgotten, we see you, we believe in you, and were holding the door open. The cheers were thunderous. After the speeches, people flooded the garage, touring the refurbished bays, signing up for classes, and crowding around the snack table like it was Christmas. Evan tugged Rachel toward the small display he'd set up himself. On a foldable table sat his laptop, a poster titled "Rebuilt: How Community Fixes More Than Machines," and a looping slideshow of neighborhood photos, each one captioned by Evan himself. Rachel pointed to one photo of Travis standing beside a smiling teen under a car lift. "You wrote this?" she asked. Evan nodded proudly. "I called it The Sound of Something Healed, because Mr. Travis says a quiet engine is the best sound in the world." Rachel felt her chest tighten. It was perfect. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the sun was melting into the rooftops, Rachel wandered back into the garage. The folding chairs had been stacked, the coffee pots emptied, the banners fluttering in the breeze like they too were exhaling. She sat on the edge of the workbench, letting it all sink in. "You okay?" Travis asked, appearing at her side. "I think so," she said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I think I really am." Travis looked at her, then gently placed a folded envelope in her hand. "What's this? Open it." She did. Inside was a deed transfer, half ownership of the garage, her name next to his. Rachel looked up, stunned. "Travis, you don't owe me anything," he said. "But this place, it's as much yours as mine now. We built it together. And I want Evan to grow up knowing that some of the strongest people start over from nothing and rise twice as high." She reached for him then, not just out of gratitude, not just out of emotion, but out of something deeper, something earned. She kissed him, and he kissed her back. No drama, no big music, just warmth, truth, and the shared breath of two people who had learned the hardest way that healing isn't always loud, it's quiet. It's steady. It's choosing to stay. And sometimes that choice is everything. 1 year later, the garage smelled like sawdust and summer air. The sounds drifting through its open doors were no longer just the rhythm of power tools or the hum of engines. There was laughter, now bright, easy. The kind that fills spaces long hollowed by hardship. Outside, the sidewalk shimmered in the morning sun. Banners hung from light poles, colorful and hand-painted, some crooked, all beautiful. Children chased each other between booths, their parents gathered under white tents lined with job fair flyers, wellness programs, and stacks of fresh fruit from a local co-op. Travis stood at the corner, squinting toward the new mural on the side of the building, a sweeping, vivid image of a phoenix rising not from fire, but from a pair of open hands. Below it, a quote in bold black script, "Second chances don't fall from the sky. They rise from where someone decided to stay." His throat tightened every time he read it. Today was the Phoenix Festival, the official celebration of the first anniversary of the initiative, now expanded to 3 sites across the city. But this one, the garage, remained the heart of it all. The place where it started. The street that refused to disappear. Rachel stood beside a table handing out T-shirts and volunteer kits. She wore jeans and a plain navy shirt, her hair in a loose ponytail. Nothing about her outfit screamed power, but people still moved toward her like she was gravity. She had that kind of presence now, not loud, not commanding, but quietly magnetic. "Ms. Whitmore," someone called. A woman with 2 teenage boys stood hesitantly at the edge of the booth. "My sons start training next week. They've never been excited about anything until now." Rachel smiled, genuine and warm. "We're so glad they're here. They're already part of the family." Travis watched her for a moment longer before approaching with 2 lemonades in hand. "Careful," he said, handing her one. "You're starting to sound like me." She took the drink and smiled. Scary thought. They clinked cups. Just then, Evan appeared, his hair slightly too long and his arms full of sound equipment. "Dad, the speaker cable's missing. And I'm pretty sure I saw Sir Pounce sleeping in the donation box again." Rachel grinned. "Do you need me to go find the cat or the cable?" Evan considered. "Probably both." She winked and jogged off, calling back, "Don't let your dad eat all the cookies while I'm gone." Travis turned toward the stage where volunteers were still arranging folding chairs. He noticed a new plaque installed beside the main garage entrance, its bronze surface catching the light. Harris Family Center, in honor of all those who chose to stay. He hadn't expected it. Rachel had insisted on the name. "You stayed when you didn't have to," she'd said. "And because of that, so did I." That evening, just before sunset, the final act of the festival began a short musical performance from the center's teen songwriting class. Evan had signed up weeks ago, quietly, nervously, but refused to tell Travis what he'd written. Now, standing in front of the crowd with a borrowed guitar and a microphone that still squeaked every few seconds, he cleared his throat. "This is a song I wrote," Evan said, eyes flicking to Travis and Rachel. "It's called Home in the Fixing." And then he played. The melody was soft, imperfect, but full of heart. The lyrics spoke of tools and hands and people who didn't give up on broken things, of engines and people both finding their rhythm again, of how sometimes healing doesn't roar, it purrs quiet and steady. Travis had never cried in public, but he did then, and so did Rachel, and so did half the crowd. After the music faded, as the sun dipped low and the air turned honey-warm, the three of them walked home together hand in hand like they'd done so many nights before. But this time, they weren't walking toward uncertainty. They were walking through something they'd built, a life, a family, a future. As they passed the mural, Evan asked, "Did you ever think when you found Rachel outside the garage that we'd end up here?" Travis looked at Rachel, who smiled at the question, then at Evan. "No," he said, "but I knew one thing that night. When someone's shivering in the dark, you don't turn them away. You open the door. You make space." Rachel added, "And you listen, even when they're not ready to speak." Evan nodded. "You both stayed." Rachel met Travis's gaze, her voice steady and full. "We all did." They stopped at the gate. The house was warm lights glowing in every window. Sir Pounce sat on the porch like a small kingtail, flicking unimpressed as always. Inside waited a kitchen table set for three. The street around them pulsed with life kids laughing, wind chimes, clinking music still faint from a distant booth. It wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a testament. A reminder that some places survive not because of buildings, but because of the people who choose to remain. And on that street, in that house behind that old garage, they stayed. And it made all the difference. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes they happen quietly when someone chooses not to walk away. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear from you what part moved you most. And tell us where in the world are you watching from. Your comments help us connect across miles and remind us that kindness has no borders. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more heartfelt stories just like this. Stories that heal, uplift, and remind us of what truly matters. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, stay kind and stay with us.